Go back to Siphamandla Goge before I take a quick break. And Siphamandla, let's talk about the threat and the dare, let's call it the dare by former President Jacob Zuma, because already way before, I mean, it took the Constitutional Court 3 months to come back with this decisive judgment and emphatic judgment, vindication of rule of law and the justice system. But he had already said that he believes that, you know, DCJ Zondo has gone to the Constitutional Court to basically seek an order that he will automatically get from those that the former president was describing as subordinates in the bench. But importantly, the former president has been saying that let them take me to jail. I don't fear going to prison.
Absolutely. That is what he has said on public platforms, and even when writing to Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo himself, that letter, many people called him being defiant. He said, listen, I'd rather go to jail, spend some time instead of going to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. But not only that, Thulasizwe, those of us who have been covering his court cases in Pietermaritzburg, he has publicly told his supporters that he doesn't fear prison. He is not scared. He'd rather go to jail. He is convinced that some within the ANC wanted to see him jailed at all costs. But it's interesting that earlier on, Thulasizwe, when we started this live crossing, you mentioned the issue of the former president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, and how his supporters were adamant that he's not going to go to jail, but at the end they are the ones who were there to support him when he presented himself to authorities. Let me read you a tweet by former President Jacob Zuma's daughter, Zuma Sambudla here. She says, Amandla, first of all, I've just spoken to my father. He is in high spirits and he has no fear. We have a choice between serving our time in Johannesburg or going to Nkandla. Of course, we have chosen to be closer to home. Lockdown or no lockdown, we will escort you to serve your time. Can tell you that the former president will be coming down to KwaZulu-Natal, and according to the judgment of the Constitutional Court, he is expected to hand himself over to the police at Nkandla police station within or in 5 days. Should he fail to do that, you will have a situation whereby the police will have to act in enforcing that judgment of the Constitutional Court. They have 3 days. So in total, you are looking at about towards the 10th of July. That should be the ultimate deadline. But the former president, according to his daughter, it's clear that he will be coming back here. He is not here as we speak, but he has said in the past that he doesn't fear prison. And one of his daughters, by the way, whom I spoke to, said to me, well, he spent 10 years in Robben Island. What do you think 15 months is? So he doesn't fear going to prison. After that judgment, of course, that's what one of his daughters said to me.
Siphamandla, I'm going to ask you to read that tweet once again, because Zuma Sambudla has become someone who basically communicates in her own special way, right? The thinking from the Jacob Zuma family, from the man himself, a lot of the times around these processes, the key decisions and announcements have come through, especially through her Twitter feed, but also through her Instagram posts. So that tweet you just read is extraordinary, and I think we can put a lot of weight to it.
Indeed, we can, because she has been seen as the authority in terms of communication here, whether the former president meets with other political leaders. Basically, she's the one who's been tweeting a lot about her father's activities, and many people have come to basically take her as the authority here. So let me read that to Thulasizwe. She says, Amandla, just spoke to my father at President J.G. Zuma's Twitter account. He is in high spirits and has no fear. Underline that, has no fear. That's what the former president has said in the past, by the way. We have a choice between serving our time in Johannesburg or Nkandla. Of course, we have chosen to be closer to home. Lockdown or no lockdown, we will escort you, meaning the former president, to serve your time. So you are clear, Thulasizwe, that this will be a political rally to send the former president off to report to the nearest police station. After that, he will have to serve his time. Earlier on, when you were speaking to my colleague Masejo, you said during your early days in journalism, you used to say, wow, what a story. I can tell you that this is one of the biggest stories in South Africa after 1994.
Yeah, and behind you there we can see some of those men clad in the MVA uniforms moving about there in the area of Nkandla village in Nkandla. Just in the last few minutes, Siphamandla, any reaction or any kind of sense that the news is filtering through in that valley of Nkandla? Because, you know, having spent some time myself standing there waiting for any kind of reaction to big news, I remember the last time I was there for something that's remotely comparable was the delivery of the report of the then public protector, Thuli Madonsela, around the Nkandla upgrades. It's kind of difficult to gauge what the sense of people is in terms of the reaction to the news. But you did have pockets back then of people who were listening to the delivery of the report on the radio and sort of a bit of chattering about it. Any of that happening at the moment in Nkandla village?
It's very quiet here, Thula Sizwe. Even the MVA members that you see there, I'm sure now my colleague Bonga Mkhize is showing you a gentleman who had just been in conversation with one lady inside former President Jacob Zuma's homestead there. They had a very brief engagement there in terms of what they were discussing. But these MVA members who are here, they've heard the news, they've heard about the judgment. I can tell you that because I've heard them calling other members of MVA discussing the judgment, saying yes, he has been sentenced to 15 months, and then they are busy organizing more and more members to come here. I spotted two family members of former President Jacob Zuma, two ladies who walked out of the homestead immediately after the judgment was delivered. I asked them how they feel, whether they have been following the judgment. They said, well, we don't care. We have not been following the judgment, but we expected the negative outcome, and then they quickly went back inside. So that's what you get here. We also had an opportunity to ask about 3 or 4 people who were passing by here whether they have heard about the judgment. They said no, but no matter what happens, according to them, they were expecting that it will be a negative outcome. One taxi driver stopped here and asked us to interview him. I said to him, how do you feel about the judgment? Then they decided to drive off. So some people have reacted here, but you get a sense that they are not bothered. They were expecting it. But these MVA members, I can tell you that they are working on logistics to have more people coming here to ensure that they show support and solidarity to the former president, who will start serving his time in jail, something that he has said in the past that he doesn't fear. So, yes, here we are now.
Yeah. Siphamandla, in delivering that judgment, Justice Siphamandla talking there about how, in the view of the majority of the court, the former president, quote-unquote, squandered the opportunity to respect this country's legal processes. Instead, when they asked him to file an affidavit on the appropriate sanction, should he be found guilty of contempt of court around April this year, the justices then now recapping and saying that instead of doing that, he threw inflammatory statements intended to undermine the authority of the court and portray himself as a victim. Just recap for us some of the interventions, the attempted interventions to try and get him to comply with the court's directives and to basically cooperate with the Zondo Commission, because now we are at a point where the court has said the horse has bolted. There's no point in trying to coerce him to cooperate with the Zondo Commission. It's now just about vindicating the justice system in the country. But there were attempts before we got to the point, weren't there? The likes of Begicele and others. And I think Julius Malema recently also indicating that that conversation did come up.
Not only those two people you are mentioning, I can tell you that even former President Jacob Zuma's supporters in KwaZulu-Natal and elsewhere in South Africa, politically there were attempts to try and persuade him to say, go to the commission, raise your objections there. But the former president, of course, was hell-bent on saying, I'm not going there. As long as the Deputy Chief Justice is still presiding over the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, I'm not going there. They'd rather arrest me, send me to jail. The police minister himself, Begicele, came here at Nkandla to try and persuade the former president. Basically, many people saw this coming. There was no way that the Constitutional Court was not going to find that the former president was defiant, that he acted in contempt of court. Remember, there was a court order here compelling him to go to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. He decided to ignore that. So he did not only ignore the commission itself, but the court judgment or the court order that was there compelling him to go. So now those attempts have been made. The leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Julius Malema, and his team came here for that tea party. That discussion did take place to try and persuade the former president to go there. Police Minister Peggy Cele, whom, by the way, his police officers together with the National Commissioner will have to enforce if the former president does not hand himself over. So he had many opportunities, but he decided to be defiant.
All right, Siphamandla, thank you for that. That's Siphamandla Goge out in Nkandla, there outside the homestead of the former President Jacob Zuma. It's an extraordinary day in South Africa. I can tell you now that there are plenty other stories on the go that we could be telling you about, but I'm convinced and convicted that actually this is the story of the moment. At least for these next few hours, we have to bring you as much of it as possible. We'll have